Hello, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today for the New Mexico Weather Outlook webinar series. My name is Victoria Temcio, and I am the Environmental Education and Community Outreach Coordinator. Before we get started, let's go over some logistics. Everyone is muted and the webinar will be recorded. The webinar recording will be automatically shared with attendees as well as available on the Covera and NIDIS website. Please enter your questions and comments in the Q&A box, and Leah will be our moderator for the Q&A and our closing today. These webinar series presentations will provide information on current and upcoming weather and climate conditions in New Mexico, with a highlight on conditions on tribal lands. The webinars take place every fourth Thursday at 10 a.m. Mountain Time. Our last webinar will be hosted on September 24th. This webinar series is made possible by the following partners: the New Mexico Climate Center, Santa Ana Pueblo Department of Natural Resources, the Covera Coalition, NOAA NIDIS, and the USDA Southwest Climate Hub. We just have a few announcements before we get this webinar started. Our first announcement: there will be a webinar on the future drought of Texas. What do researchers and stakeholders need to know? On Wednesday, September 2nd, from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. The registration link is provided here and can also be found on the drought.gov website. Covera will be hosting their third Healthy Soil webinar on restoring soil health in fields affected by sediment. This will occur on Wednesday, September 9th from 12 to 1:30 p.m. Mountain Time. For more information and to register for this webinar, please visit the Covera Coalition website. And last but not least, this partnership and development of webinars originated with the hopes of our partners hosting a rangeland precipitation monitoring workshop. That workshop is still in the works, and we plan to host that workshop in the fall of 2021. And without further ado, I would like to welcome and introduce our speaker, Dr. Dave Dubois of the State Climatologist of New Mexico, Director of the New Mexico Climate Center, and Associate College Professor at New Mexico State University. Thank you, Dave.
Hello, Dave. You are muted, and so we cannot hear you right now.
All right, is that better?
Yes, there we go. Now we can hear you. Thank you, Dave.
Good. Yeah, I had to reset my mic again, so thanks for that. And that let me know. So let's start off with the precipitation. So how much have we gotten in August? So for the first 26 days of August, we really want to see colors on this map that are green and blue. However, if you can look on the legend there, from red to brown to yellow, those are below average. So majority of the state for the month of August has been below average. A few little pockets here and there, as in terms of middle of the central New Mexico, have gotten some rain, but it's been real hit and miss on even those areas. So let's look at the temperature over the. There we go. Same time period, August, first 26 days of August, looking at the percent of average temperature. most of the state is between the 3 to 7 degree, even a few little pockets of between 7 and 10 degrees above average. So warm and dry for most all of New Mexico. So let's look at a few, like in the past webinars, we've looked at a few individual weather stations. Let's go from the far northeast in Clayton. This is the calendar year precipitation. So starting from January to pretty much yesterday. And smooth brown line, that's the long-term average where we should be. And the green line is the actual precipitation. So if we're below that long-term average, we're below average. And so for the current calendar year, we're sitting at 9.3 inches. So that's a little over 2.5 inches below average. Last year we had a little over a foot of rain. And over the last 30 days, and this is going to be, I'm going to put this statistic on every one of these, we've only gotten 0.07 of an inch, 0.07. Let's go a little further south at Alcalde. So current calendar year, 4.17, that's more than 3 inches below average for calendar year. So last year we had over 8 inches. Last 30 days, we've only had 0.04 of an inch. So we've got some really dry periods here in Alcalde. Let's go a little further to the south and looking at Los Lunas. Current calendar year, 4.14 inches. So that's 1.89 inches below average for the calendar year. We had over 5 inches last year at this time. Last 30 days, we've only had 0.08 of an inch. Very dry. You can see on the graph there on the right, you can see some of those. We don't like to see those horizontal green lines. That means we haven't had any rain for those time periods. So right now we've got a really dry stretch, and since toward the end of July. Let's look all the way up in Dulce, near the Colorado border. Same time period, calendar year, we've gotten 6.77 inches. That's 4.91 inches below average. So last year at this time, we've had over 14 inches. In the last 30 days, we've only had 0.13 inches of rain. So you can look at that graph on the bottom compared to the other stations. You can see how far we are from the long-term average. And you can see a lot of those horizontal lines in the green, meaning really dry periods. And remember, we were looking at that second chart that we saw, very warm temperatures as well as dry periods. So let's look at the next weather station over on the Four Corners Farmington Ag Science Center. Current calendar year precip sits at 2.8 inches. That's 2.44 inches below average. At this time last year, we were at 5.78 inches, and we had no precipitation at all in the last 30 days. So you can see those really long stretches from toward the end of March all the way till pretty much July 23rd. We have just very small amounts of precip, and then a few days of some precip, and then it's been really dry since the end of July. So not a good news. Let's look at Streamflow over the last 4 months. We've been showing these graphs for the past few webinars. Let's look on the right side, the top right, the Rio Grande at Embudo station. So the little triangles, those are the long-term medians, so 89 years of data. And then the blue squiggly line there is the discharge. So that's actual data. And you can see the melt out that we usually have, peaks in the spring, right around May, end of May, April. We peaked out very early this year, earlier than the median, and you can see we've been below average in terms of discharge, and we're down to less than 200 CFS, where we usually in the long term ran around 300 this time. Going further south on the Rio Grande and looking at the Albuquerque station, same time period, you can see we're much below average in the actual discharge in the river. And let's look at the left side. Upper left is the Animas River at Farmington. As you can see, we start off not that bad in the melt off early in May and in the beginning of June, but we've since then we saw the melt out pop out. We've been low flow on the Animas, and if we go to the bottom left, that's the Pecos River. That's a stream gauge right above Santa Rosa Reservoir. As you can see, the meltout, we peaked early and above average, and then ever since then we've gotten really low flows on there, and you can see those little rain events pop in, those little short-term spikes in there. But overall, you know, we're down to one CFS above Santa Rosa, where we should be on the order of a few tens to 50, 60 CFS. So let's look at, we had our state drought meeting this past week, and this was presented from the Office of the State Engineer, looking at reservoir storages across New Mexico. And so just looking at, I highlighted the current storage levels in thousands of acre feet. So if you compare that highlighted yellow to the long-term average, or even last year, we've been below average pretty much on every reservoir. The only one that's been the same as last year is Caballo. Remember, those are managed reservoirs. Just comparing, I think all of them are below average, and seeing some of those. We were still in irrigation season for the Rio Grande, and also in the Pecos as well. So we'll report out next month to see where we stand at the end of the irrigation season. So let's look a little more at some of our drought indicators. So here's a model base from NASA. The SPORT group produces these relative soil moisture, column soil moisture, and this is a 1 month difference in percent change over the last month compared to other months. So we can see there's been some drying out in the kind of central New Mexico, and also the far northeast. I've done some trips up to the northeast, and they've gotten some early rains, but in July. But however, they've been drying out since then. They haven't had much rain at all in August. So so other areas are kind of holding still. But if we look at a longer time frame, if you go to look at 6 months, this will really see a big change. Last 6 months compared to other 6 months, some really big changes. We've seen in terms of percent change, more than 8, 10, even nearly 20% drop in relative soil moisture. This is the column soil moisture, so not a good signature we're seeing here all across New Mexico. Just a few areas, looking at Otero County, but it's not most of the state in poor shape in terms of column soil moisture. How has the vegetation responded? Well, it depends on where you are, but overall, pretty poor. This is just one of the vegetation indices that we use, or we use other ones, but this is sort of a snapshot of the state. A lot of places are in this, if not in pre-drought, in moderate or severe, and a few little areas in extreme drought in terms of the vegetation response. We've also looked at the NDVI, and we've seen other areas that even to highlight some of the worst areas along the Pecos as well. So things are not looking good on the vegetation response. So how are other people? So this is the COCORA's condition monitoring condition report, and I just downloaded this morning, reflecting our latest drought monitor and all the reports that are come in since the 21st of August. A lot of folks are reporting very dismal drought conditions out there, from severely dry, just a few mildly dry, all over New Mexico. So it depends on where you are and type of impact you're seeing on drought. And for the most part, it's matching the U.S. drought monitor. A few areas we use these to help gauge where things are happening, just to see where, if we're not able to get out there, we're seeing what some of our COCORA's observers are seeing. So if you're a COCORA's observer, please submit a condition report. That'll help us out a lot. Thank you. And let's look at this. We've been looking at this product called Grasscast. And so we're getting toward the end of the season in terms of this product. So basically, it's looking at for the 3 maps, if precipitation between now, which was kind of middle of August and the end of August, which is just a few days from now, is above, near, or below normal. We estimate that the grassland production in the area this shown in this map this summer in terms of pounds per acre of peak biomass on September 30th will be so many percent more or less than the long-term average. So as you can see, most of the places we're below average in a lot of these areas. So I would focus a lot on how does that map on the right side compare to what you're looking at in your area in terms of grassland production. A lot of areas in the southeast are less than 30% of its long-term average. A few areas that are between 30 and 50%. It's a pocket over in Union County that's maybe a little above average to quite a bit above average, but we'll wait and see. But overall, things looking pretty bad in terms of what this model was predicting. So it'd be nice if anybody would like to give some feedback on that. That'd be great. Are you seeing some below average grassland production in your area? If you have grassland, if you have some measurements, that we would really appreciate that. So how's the drought monitor look like? This was actually just published this morning. We've gotten a lot of feedback from folks out there in the field, and things are not looking good. We've actually increased our D2, and we brought in some D3 areas, expanded a few. So things right now, almost 95% of the state is in drought. That's in the D1 to D3 category. Right now, we don't have any D4 in New Mexico. Really appreciative of that. So in terms of D1 through D3, like I said, 95%. Last year, we were just shy. We were around 28% of the state. So a lot of degradation since last year, and even we've just slightly increased from last week. And 3 months ago, we were only at 38%. So things have gotten worse this monsoon. That's not a good thing. We don't want. This is a time of year when we get 30 to 40 in a couple areas, 50% of our precipitation, and this is not good for our grasslands. So let's transition the last 5 minutes or so for this briefing is looking at the outlook. So we've been looking at this Nino 3.4, and I draw a little blue oval around it that sort of give us a clue on what's going to be coming down the road in the next few months. The seasonal forecast is based off a lot of that. It's not only just the temperatures, but also the response of the atmosphere to the cooling of the Central Pacific. We look at this Nino 3.4 as our clue, and then what we need also is the convection as well as the wind shifts in the strengths changing. So let's look at that. At least look at the forecast for the Central Pacific. And so as a result of that, we're seeing that we're in a La Nina watch. Remember, those are when we see the Central Pacific, that Nino 3.4 go cooler than average. So the models are showing that this will continue on throughout the winter. Starting right about now, as we're seeing that it's right now. It's last week it was minus 0.08 degrees Celsius. And the trigger for those is 0.5. We have to do 3 consecutive months of those, and then three consecutive packages of those 3 averages of the 3-month averages. So we're not there in terms of the La Nina, but it looks like it's going to be coming. And so this is a graph that shows the probabilities of La Nina happening as opposed to neutral. So the probabilities of a La Nina, so if you go on to the far left is July, August, September, we're right about equal, but as soon as August, September, October comes around, we're more than 50% probability that La Nina, and then going into the fall, more than 60% probability. So it's more than likely it's gonna be here. That's favored for this winter, and those usually mean that it's going to be. They typically have been La Ninas in New Mexico have been drier and warmer winters. They don't always appear that way. Every La Nina is different, but that's sort of the probability, the highest probability that that'll occur. And I think we'll talk a little bit about that in subsequent webinars when we get a little closer to the winter. But that's where we're heading in terms of the climate community is saying La Nina's favored this winter and be prepared. So let's look at some of the forecast graphics. So we'll start short term and go all the way out to the winter. And so you can see this is the next 7 days through the beginning of September, starting today. So a little bit of precip coming down, but overall not a lot. If you look at the legend over on the left, that lightest green is 1/100th of an inch, between 1/100th and 1/10th of an inch. So a lot of southern New Mexico maybe getting just a little bit of precip in a few little areas as you go up in elevation, maybe 1/4 of an inch. Not until you get into above Interstate 40, even into Arizona, you may be into maybe 1/4 to a 1/2 inch, and then over east of Interstate 25 to the northeast. And maybe over the next week, you could be getting upwards of 1.25 inches, few areas 1.5 inches over that next week's. But remember, some of those areas are more than 2 inches below average. And we've only gotten a few areas, a few 100ths of an inch in August. So we'll still be behind even with these amounts, but it's good. We're glad we're seeing some precip. So let's look out for the next week. So this is out to the 5th of September, the 6 to 10 day outlook. Focusing mainly on the right map there, showing kind of the below average signal. We're seeing that dryness and more favored in northern New Mexico in the Four Corners. And if you're in the far southeast, maybe you may be seeing a few more of the probabilities are inching up a little bit above average. But for most of New Mexico, northeast Arizona, southwest Colorado, below average probability of precip next few days. Going a little further out, 2 weeks, September 3 through 9, pretty much the same story. Most all of New Mexico still in that below average probability. So we may get some precip, but it's still below what we would expect this time of year. Going out a little further out, 3 to 4 weeks. But basically, boy, I mean, it's the same story, below average, but it's mainly over the whole, like 2/3 or even more, 3/4 of the country, even Alaska. Look at it. Only place we're seeing above average is the southeast and part of the mid-Atlantic there. So if we look out for the whole month of September, kind of summarizing the previous maps, focusing on the right side, below average for most of New Mexico and the Intermountain West. So not a lot of good news, I'm afraid. And just showing you on the left side, above average temperature. So we've been struggling a lot with a lot of evaporative losses. Our evapotranspiration maps are showing lots of ET. So a lot more water is needed for plants struggling if we don't get that. Let's go out a little further. So using those clues, beginning of the cooler season, below average still for most all of Utah, Colorado, into the southern Great Plains, and still seeing a drier signal in New Mexico. Not a strong 33% chance, but more up in the higher elevations, 40% probability, and through September, October, November. Going a little further out, extended outlook. So this is our winter. This is where we are right now in terms of prediction, our outlook for December, January, February. So I would paint this as a very classical map of a La Nina signature. A lot of below average precipitation in the southern states and above average precipitation in the northern states, in the Midwest and the Great Lakes. So that's where we are. So these maps were generated, the forecasts were just published on the 20th of August, so we have to wait another month to get updates. But I don't expect to see that much change, because we never relying on the Central Pacific to give us these outlooks, and that's our long-term global drivers. It impacts the United States this way, and La Niñas tend to impact southern New Mexico more than northern. Not always, but on many cases it's been drier on this, and that's kind of what we're seeing there in the maps. So the last map I'll show here is the drought outlook. So this is valid for pretty much a few days ago to the end of November, and just released. Basically not a good picture for most all of the Southwest and Intermountain West. Drought persisting, and then the areas that are not in drought, they're likely going to develop into drought, and that's applicable all through pretty much most of Texas, as well as going all the way up into western Kansas, and hitting the areas where there's a lot of fires as well in the far west. So I wish I had better news again. Sorry about that, but that's what the outlooks are showing. I give you my best interpretation of those right now. If you have any questions, let me know. Appreciate you attending, and I think we'll go into some question and answer period this time.
Great. Thank you so much, Dave, as usual. Super informative and tough news indeed, but we appreciate you being the interpreter and messenger of all this information. So I invite all of you to enter your questions in the questions box or in the chat box. Alternatively, I will look and see if you raise your hand, and I can unmute you. So yeah, feel free to bring us your questions. I see someone raising their hand. Okay, I'm figuring all this out. Unmute Larry. Okay, you're unmuted, Larry. Uh-oh, I can't hear you. I don't know if I'm doing this wrong. Larry, you want to try talking again? Oh, you're muted now. Unmute Larry.
Yes, I'm wondering if the current weather disturbances in the Gulf of Mexico and now Texas, Louisiana might give us any chance of moisture the next day or so.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Larry. I wish I had a better answer than no. If you were in Oklahoma, maybe, but no, I don't think. I mean, we've got our large scale pattern is basically steering all of that moisture. It's all coming up clockwise, coming up into the Gulf, and then it's making it's going to be making a really quick right-hand turn. You know, folks up in the Midwest and Northeasters, they're going to be getting all the blessings of that hurricane tropical storm by now. But yeah, I wish that was the case. The only time we usually get remnants are the most likely ones are from the Eastern Pacific, and a lot of those we've seen a few boil up in the Pacific. There's a few out there right now, but the large scale patterns is basically preventing them from going north. Maybe in later in the end of the monsoon, so early fall. It seems like in the past we've seen a bunch of those come up the Baja, but you know, we bring in a bunch of moisture, so that helps. We've gotten some of those in the past, so maybe, I don't know, it's hard to tell. There was a outlook for the tropical outlook, and it was for above average in the Atlantic, but I think if I remember right, it was below average for the Pacific. But we'll wait and see, though. I wish I had better news on that one.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for this presentation.
You bet.
Thanks, Dave, and thanks, Larry. I have another hand raised here, Paul, so I'm going to unmute you now, Paul. You're unmuted. Paul, I believe you're unmuted. Maybe you didn't mean to raise your hand. That's always possible. Yeah, okay. Sorry, Paul, I'm not sure if you're trying to talk and we just can't hear you. And if that is true, you can also type into the chat box just in case. Anyone else?
You can always email. If you haven't got all your thoughts together, you can send a quick email.
Yep, absolutely. Dave is very, very interested and excited to get your email, so feel free to reach out to Dave.
Yeah, I've been spent a late night watching the hurricane, and I wish it was going a little further west, but yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of places definitely hit really hard.
Yeah. Well, I'm not seeing any more questions right now, and I see that we are a little bit over 11. Oh, I see one more entered in. Okay, hold on. Oh, just a bunch of thank yous coming in, and then also, oh, and here's Paul's question. Okay, thanks, Paul, for adapting. Paul's question is, does the current storms in the Eastern Pacific have a chance of getting to us? Oh, you kind of just answered this, but I'll let you.
Yeah, they most of them have more of a westerly component, meaning they go from east to west. That's basically the way that the large scale patterns are. And as you go further south, we're in the area where we get most of our weather systems go from west to east. And as you go further south, in terms of the global weather patterns, we get more of the winds go from east to west. So unless we get a what they call disturbance that actually we can dip in and bring kind of pushing them further north, we usually don't get the influence of tropical systems in the Pacific. However, we do, that probability goes up, I think, as more we go into the later in the year. That system seems to break down a bit so that we can get some of the tracks go up the Baja, and a lot of times that's kind of what we're sort of that's our version of the atmospheric rivers. We've seen those in California. They come off. They're more of the northern central Pacific, bringing lots of rain to California. But occasionally we'll get some of these that come up the Baja and mainly dump in Arizona, but occasionally they go a little further east. We've gotten some of those in the past few years, and actually given us some record precip, and we actually had some of that last year, actually, a tropical system, actually a couple of them that brought in a bunch of rain to the east side of the state. And basically those are still, even though they're remnants, it can bring 3 or 4 inches in a few little very isolated areas. And usually it's, in the past I've seen them, they kind of travel from a southwest to northeast trajectory. You can see those. And if we look at their long-term maps, we can actually see the remnants of that in our 1-year maps. You can still see the fall impacts of some of those rain events. But I wish we had more of those, but well, we'll have to wait and see. We may get some this fall. Hard to tell.
Thank you. And then we'll take one more question, and that is from Lindsay, and the question is, given the potential for a La Nina this winter, how does this factor into next year's fire season? Can we expect to see more frequent fires, higher up in the elevation, more mixed conifer and spruce fir fires?
Really good question. I'm not a fire expert, but I mean, however, it does lay. Remember, fires, you have to have fuel. You have to have a lot of fuel. So if we haven't had a lot of fuel grow, so it also depends on the previous year, maybe even further back, 2 years, the last year, and then as well as the conditions during the fire season. Well, I mean, the fire season seems to be growing longer and longer. That's what the fire people have been telling me. But we have to have quite a bit of fuel, and then the conditions for very dry and warm, high winds are usually. So I don't really have that available. We could probably maybe talk about that. We can mention that, and then on the next webinar, get some consultation from the fire weather folks to really give you a better answer for that. I don't want to speculate too much on that. I haven't really done the homework on that area, but at least the ingredients could be there for a dry winter, and then potentially even through the spring. So that at least that variable has a good chance of happening. I don't know about the fuel levels.
Thank you, Dave. And thank you everyone for your questions, and thank you to all the fellow organizers for all the work you put into this, and thank you to all of you for participating today. As always, please let us know if there are additional topics you'd like us to cover in a future webinar. You can put that in the chat box, or you can email one of us. Our emails are listed there. And yeah, we hope this information can help you plan for the summer. As mentioned in the intro, the webinar will be recorded and shared with all attendees, and it'll be on the Kavir Coalition website and the NIDIS website. Please feel free to reach out to any of us with any other questions. And yes, stay safe and stay healthy, everyone.